Eternal Darkness is the debut full-length album from Eskilstuna, Sweden-based death doom metal quintet Eternal Darkness. And this is a band that's been around since the early 90s as a sort of fixture in the underground of their area, Eskilstuna, which produced a lot of death thrash to start, but eventually bands like Crypt of Kerberos and even The Black and whatnot. And so this was a novel band at the time, the same way label mates Moondark were, in that they were doing death doom metal at a time where it wasn't that popular in the more traditional style, and there weren't a lot of bands in Sweden doing that sort of thing, at least not with any serious results in terms of either full-length albums or popular releases. So the band really, most of what the band's history, what they're known from, occurred in the space of just a couple of years between 1991 and 1992, although they were active for a total of 4 years with an unfinished full-length album having been recorded in that span. The main reason that I remember this band is because they were kind of a contemporary of again, Moondark, or one of my favorite groups, Gormant, where they were using slower pacing and heavier tuning to achieve something that was bigger than a lot of the death doom metal that was happening at the time. It's often used as an example of underground old school death doom metal that never quite reached its popularity because of the straightforward nature of it. Gothic and melodic death doom became popular right around this time in a big way, and they didn't really fit into that sound. There were many other reasons why this band did not continue on, but the main thing to note is that they eventually did return. So their demos were infamous for being particularly heavy. The classic sound of them was a standout for anyone who ventured that far into death doom's underground past. And as a fan of that sort of thing, of course, this was one of my favorites, a notable among very few in the Scandinavian death doom metal scene that was very simple and straightforward, but also heavy and ready for an album. So it kind of stuck in my mind the same way Sorrow did, in the sense that we had some releases from them archivally, but their unreleased debut full-length album never came out. It was never re-recorded, but we did get most of the unreleased album on a compilation that was released about 2006 or so, from what I remember. That Total Darkness was my introduction to the band, and that's kind of where it ended. You figured they weren't coming back. They were pretty much done with what they had accomplished at that point. They did eventually reform. They were joined by some new members, and they made it happen via Peter Bjargo of Crypt of Kerberos and whatnot, who also, I think, helped out with the Moondark record from last year. The thing to appreciate here is that the band have come back and they still sound like themselves. Somehow, after so many years, they've managed something that is up to a modern standard in terms of its general fidelity, and it's not necessarily emulating anyone but themselves. And this full length really just recaptures what they were all about within the span of several new original pieces. So we'll cut to one of those, listen to just a little bit of it, and get a sense for the heavier impact of this record. So admittedly, some of the appeal of this band is outright nostalgia for something that never was and now is, as well as a prime example of what death doom metal was all about, closer to its point of inception, beyond the 80s, where we started getting something that was coming from death metal fans within these new scenes that were coming out. And it's an important, Eternal Darkness is an important band in a specific niche of Swedish death metal in a certain area and scene, but also just as an example of fine death doom metal coming out of Sweden. Again, like I said before, it's also just an idealized sound that influenced many other groups as they ventured through the past in looking for their interest in either retro death metal or just pure death metal. The only real requirement for this record to really be appealing here is that they didn't change who they were. It's sort of like if Winter came back and they were a different thing. That's not exactly what anybody wants. They want a band that sounds like themselves. And that's what the major appeal here is. There is nostalgia associated with this sound for me specifically, but also this is a old school death doom metal album, very heavy, very loud in its production, and is focused on the riffs as well as the depressive and aggressive nature of death doom metal. It's that juxtaposition of forms which still finds a way to be all about the riff. In this sense, this is not the type of record that's going to appeal to the gothic death metal fan or whatnot. This is very much focused on death metal and its impact and a very straightforward nature. I think the more time that I spend with modern death metal, the more refreshing a record like this is, where they keep it straightforward, they keep their impact direct, and they don't mess with it in a half-assed, careless way. You can tell that every piece and every riff on this record was there was some care was put into its placement and its effect, and I think there's just an expertise to this that comes with experience and, of course, years of thought that went into the whole construction of it. And so it's a fine record, and one that I think will appeal to a specific fan who first of all knows who Eternal Darkness are in 2025, but also appreciates the legacy of death doom metal in Scandinavia and abroad. And so this is the kind of thing that is specifically my kind of thing. It's exactly what I spent so many years researching and listening to and enjoying as a fan, and to see this band realized in 2025 is sort of a thing that most people didn't think was actually going to happen, but it finally did, and it is actually just as good as one would have hoped. It's exactly what a fan would want. It speaks to the legacy of Eternal Darkness in a serious way, and it doesn't really fuck around otherwise. So it's a great record. It's a solid death doom metal record. I think one of the better releases of July this year, as well as one of the better releases of the year for my taste in death doom metal. So check that out for yourself. A very high recommendation for me. I think this is an essential thing if you are interested in the holistic history of death doom metal and death metal in Sweden, and it's an important add to that legacy. For the modern death doom metal fan, this is more of an old school interest, although the sound quality is sharp enough to where you should be able to appreciate the impact and the severity of these acts. So very good record overall, and I think it will have broader appeal to people who are looking not only into the past, but just looking for something that is authentic, old school, but has its own personality. So check that out for yourself and see what you think.